everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is my shelf tour of my Agatha Christie collection. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. And on this particular week in September, I like to celebrate Agatha Christie and her books, and that's because it's Agatha Christie's birthday. Hopefully this video is coming out to you on Agatha Christie's actual birthday, the 15th of September, and this is my Agatha Christie shelf tour. So I'm going to be showing you the shelves in a moment, and when I've done that I'm going to talk you through a little bit more about some of the shelves and some of the books that I have on those shelves. And my shelves are full of Agatha Christie books. Let's take a look first of all at what I have on each shelf. I'll start by telling you about the different shelves. So loosely, this top shelf is books about Agatha Christie and her writing, and books that have been written by other authors. So the Sophie Hannah Poirot books are up here too. As you can see, this second shelf down has some of my Agatha Christie memorabilia, including some Agatha Christie stamps, which I'll show you in a minute. And this is where I keep some collected books, the plays, and all of the Mary Westmacotts on here, plus a little bit of overspill of Agatha Christie hardback books. So going down to the third shelf, this is where I keep the majority of the hardbacks of Agatha Christie, and behind here is more hardbacks. These are mostly the facsimile edition of Agatha Christie books, which replicate the original UK covers, and you can see my Poirot that I crocheted is on here too, along with this nice new edition of The Mousetrap. So moving on down to the fourth shelf, this is where I keep my Poirot paperbacks, and this moves along onto a second shelf, and I tend to organise my books by detective, so I keep all my Poirot ones together, then all my Marples, and then on another shelf I'll show you in a minute, I have all of the standalones. I keep the Tommy and Tuppence together in one section, but the rest of the standalones are all just grouped together. And I tend to keep these, although they may not be exact, I tend to keep these in order of publication where possible. So these are the two Poirot and Miss Marple shelves of paperback, and then coming down before the rest of the paperbacks we have a shelf of all my Agatha Christie graphic novels. There's also the Agatha graphic biography on here, and some of the overspill from my books about Agatha Christie or related to Agatha Christie shelf. So I've got the Agatha Christie miscellany, Poirot and Me by David Suchet, and this one is a magazine about Poirot. So, or there's an Agatha Christie special in that magazine anyway, so I kept that there. And then the bottom shelf is all the rest of my Christies that are in paperback, and these start with the final Miss Marple book because I couldn't fit that on my Marple shelf, and it then goes into the standalone books, followed by the Tommy and Tuppence books right at the very end there. And right at the very end are two books that are novelisations of Agatha Christie plays. That's the shelves in general, so I'm going to talk you through some of the things in a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm back, and I thought I would show you first of all the books that are on the top shelf, the shelf that's all about Agatha Christie mostly. One of the books on that shelf that I haven't really probably read cover to cover, but I have dipped into, is this Encyclopedia of Agatha Christie by Matthew Bunson called The Complete Christie, and this is literally like an encyclopedia of Christie. So that is that one. And perched on the top there you also will have seen a book I really enjoyed last year, and I did do a full review of this, Agatha Christie Poirot, The Greatest Detective in the World by Mark Aldridge. Highly recommend that one if you are a Poirot fan, and it does have spoilers in it, but the spoilers are handily contained in notes in the back, so you can choose whether or not to delve into those spoilers. One really good book that I love on that shelf is The Life and Crimes of Agatha Christie. This is a little bit sort of encyclopedia-ish as well, but I preferred this one because it goes through the books in order of publication, I think, or it might have been in order of when Christie wrote them. There are some photographs in this one as well, and yeah, I really enjoyed reading this. Charles Osborne is also the author who wrote the novelisations of some of Agatha Christie's plays, so he is obviously very knowledgeable on Christie. I also have on that shelf 2 books by Christie herself, and that is Come Tell Me How You Live, which was a memoir of like archaeology, although it didn't have that much archaeological detail. It was more like following a summer in the life of Christie on an archaeological dig with her second husband Max Mallowan. And the other one, of course, is her autobiography. I have read this, very much enjoyed it, and I definitely want to listen to this CD that it has in the back, because it has Christie reading some of her autobiography, which I believe was found on the tapes where she had dictated the book, but sadly not all of the tapes had survived because she used to record over things a lot. I do look forward to listening to that still, but I thought I would leave it a while since I finished the autobiography. A couple of books about Christie. This was the first book I read about Christie's disappearance, and it's called Agatha Christie and the 11 Missing Days by Jared Cade. Quite interesting, a bit speculative, but I enjoyed it. And this is A is for Arsenic, The Poisons of Agatha Christie, which was a really, really good book going into detail about the different poisons that Agatha Christie uses in her books. Also on that shelf we have, highly recommend these, and these do tell you at the beginning of each chapter which books are going to be potentially spoiled, so I had to sometimes read these carefully when I hadn't finished the Agatha Christie books, or go and read a book before I read a chapter. But highly recommend finding out more about Agatha Christie's secret notebooks. These are by John Coran, and they are really well done. John Coran had access to Agatha Christie's actual notebooks and found an absolute wealth of interesting stuff in there. So this is the first one, and this was the follow-up, which I wouldn't say is as exciting, but this one's called Murder in the Making, and it was also about Agatha Christie's notebooks. Also on that shelf I have Sophie Hannah's continuation Poirot books, because I didn't really know where else to put those. Agatha Christie's estate have authorised Sophie Hannah to write these continuation novels for Poirot, and this one's the first one, The Monogram Murders. Very cool covers of these. And the second one is called Closed Casket, and I think this might be the fourth one. I think I've actually not got the third one, The Mystery of Three Quarters, but this is The Killings at Kingfisher Hill. I've read all of those. I don't like them as much as Agatha Christie's Poirot, but I do like them for what they are, so that's fine. And also squeezed onto that shelf is a collection of 3 Agatha Christie books. This one's got The Mystery of the Blue Train, The Listerdale Mystery, and Murder at the Vicarage in it. I actually have multiple copies of Mystery of the Blue Train, as you're going to see, but I've kept this because I don't actually have any other copies of Murder at the Vicarage or The Listerdale Mystery at the moment, so definitely keeping this at least until I have copies of those. May even keep it longer because it's quite a cool old edition. That is shelf number 1, not even mostly books written by Christie. So my second shelf down is where the books written by Christie start to come into the picture. And on that shelf, in front of everything, I keep a few things. One is a notebook that I've got with "And Then There Were None" on the front, and there's a quote on the back that says, "There are 5 of us here in this room. One of us is a murderer." That's a quote from Wargrave in the novel. So, love the design of this, and it's got lined pages. Haven't ever used that, just keep it on my shelf. These are really cool. These are Agatha Christie stamps, and you can look at these with a magnifying glass and see clues, and there is some information about Christie as well that came with this. I'm very happy to have these. So the different stamps are representing Murder on the Orient Express, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, The Body in the Library, And Then There Were None, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and A Murder is Announced. Very, very cool. The other thing that was in front of the books, because I don't really yet have a place to put this, is The Floating Admiral, which is by many authors of the golden age of crime, members of the Detection Club, and Agatha Christie wrote one chapter in this, so I've kept it, even though I didn't particularly enjoy reading the story that much. So yeah, hopefully this will eventually have a space properly on my shelves as I continue to collect. This is one of my favourite Agatha Christie finds ever. I got this for 20p in a library book sale, which is why it is very, very worse for wear. And I've read all the stories in this at least once, some of them twice. This contains Agatha Christie's standalones, including Tommy and Tuppence from the 1940s. So it contains NRM, which is a Tommy and Tuppence, Towards Zero, Sparkling Cyanide, and Crooked House. And as with the other collected edition, I would definitely keep this until I own copies of all the others, which I don't at the moment. I don't think I own copies of any of them. But also, I have loved reading this, a bargain at 20p. Next to that, I keep my Hercule Poirot Complete Short Stories book, and I actually read lots of the Poirot short stories in here. Most of them are actually in other story collections or editions, so I have read a lot of them in other places, but I did read the story collection, The Labours of Hercule, or The Labours of Hercules, I suppose it's called. I read them in this one because I don't have a copy of that. Next on that shelf, I also keep my Mary Westmacott collection. I bought this one first, second-hand, The Rose and the Yew Tree, so I keep that next to the other ones just because these ones all nicely match. I have read this one, and I've also read these two, Giant's Bread and Unfinished Portrait. I'm trying to read the rest in their order, so I've got Absent in the Spring, which I planned to read this month, A Daughter's Daughter, and The Burden. Then I've got some like nice editions that I've got basically. This one is a novella which Christie then reworked as Dead Man's Folly, so it wasn't released until the 2000s. So this is Hercule Poirot and the Greenshaw Folly, and it has this gorgeous cover that features Greenway on it, Agatha Christie's own home, and it features Christie herself on the back. And I just think this is such a beautiful cover by Tom Adams, and it has insanely scary end papers as well. Whoa. Which I think may have been used in the Dead Man's Folly first edition. So that's a beautiful book. This is one of only 2 Agatha Christie actual first editions that I own, and this one's The Pale Horse. This one is a first edition from 1961, and my husband kindly bought me this one for my collection. Previously to getting this, it had been quite difficult to find any first editions with their dust jacket, so I don't actually own any others like this. I do think that this one's a first edition as well though. This is a first edition from 1958, but with no dust jacket, and that's of Ordeal by Innocence. I found that in a second-hand shop. And I also have 2 volumes of Agatha Christie's plays on this shelf. I have read this one, The Mousetrap and Selected Plays, which contains 4 plays. I haven't read this one, which is Witness for the Prosecution and Other Plays. I think this also contains 4 plays, which are Witness for the Prosecution, Towards Zero, Verdict, and Go Back for Murder. And I have actually seen Go Back for Murder performed. That is a version of Five Little Pigs, so love that one. I do own another book in this type of edition, and that's the ABC Murders, which you'll see in a minute when we go to the next shelf. The third shelf is the shelf you can normally see behind me in my videos, and this is where I keep all of my hardbacks. These are facsimile copies of the first editions that were reproduced, and most of these were given to me by a very kind friend who I very much appreciate for donating her collection to me. So in front on that shelf, as you will recognise, I always keep my Hercule Poirot that I crocheted. I do have a video where I crocheted him if you are interested in crochet. that can be found. I'll link it in the description down below. And I'll pop him here for now. And I also have this was new this year to my collection, a copy of the Mousetrap 70th Anniversary Edition. And this has lots of extras that I haven't read yet, but also has a copy of the play script, which I have read. So this is very new to my collection as well. This is actually the latest book to come into my Christie collection. This was a gift from the lovely Emily from Novell Novels, and it's a facsimile edition of The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie. I haven't read this in a very, very long time, so I think I might have to do a reread of this one soon. For some reason I've shelved this shelf, so Miss Marple comes first and then the Poirot books. That's just the way I seem to have done it. On the rest of the shelves it's the other way around. So I also have, I believe this is a facsimile edition. I found this in a library sale as well, I think for 50p, and this is the 13 Problems by Agatha Christie, which I really, really like this edition of. Very cool. I also have 2 copies of Star Over Bethlehem by Agatha Christie. These are, this has stories and poetry in it, and I have 2 copies because when my friend donated me her collection, my mum had already found me a copy of this in a charity shop, so I still have 2 of those and haven't reshelved one of them yet to make space for the new book. So the rest of these are all Poirot facsimile first editions. I got this one with Agatha Christie magazine when it started, but I don't think I continued collecting that because I had some of the books. I'd read a lot of them from the library, and I think, as always with these magazines, they got expensive, so I only ever bought one of them, and that was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So yeah, I got that. And I think most of the rest of these were from my friend. So she kindly gave me The Big Four, The Mystery of the Blue Train, which is the Agatha Christie book I have by far the most copies of. I also have Lord Edgware Dies, Peril at End House, and Murder on the Orient Express. Actually, I definitely had this one as well. I think maybe I did buy another copy of the magazine when this one was there because it's one of my absolute favourites. I don't think that was in the collection my friend gave me. So the rest definitely are, and they are Appointment with Death, Death in the Clouds, Cards on the Table, which I absolutely love, Dumb Witness, which I reread recently and loved. This one actually I did buy again from a library sale, I think. My mum might have got me it, and that's Taken at the Flood by Agatha Christie. And that will just about fit in there. So actually the book I'm going to need to rehome is this one, The ABC Murders, because it doesn't match the edition. It's the same sort of edition as my copy of Witness for the Prosecution and Other Plays. So I'll pop that there for now. So we now move on to my Poirot collection that normally sits behind me here on this shelf. These have been very much collected piecemeal, mostly second hand, and a lot of these I actually got from my mum because I read a lot of the books from the library the first time around, and when my mum read a lot of the books the first time around, she gradually gathered some of them from charity shops and passed them on to me afterwards for my collection. So largely when I've collected Agatha Christie books, unless I get the same edition twice, I haven't sort of cleared out any. I've just kept them because I like to have more than one edition of some of these books. I keep these in order of publication mostly, so if they seem to be in the wrong order to you, it will just be my clumsy reshelving when I've taken books off and on. So of course, the first Poirot book, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, I definitely bought that one new because I bought it as a treat for myself when I was working in my first ever job. So that's definitely that. The Murder on the Links, can't remember how I came to this one. I think I might have bought that one new as well. Naughty, naughty. Some of these are a bit shinier than others, and the shiny ones I think came in a set from like a bargain book catalogue or something. So that's Poirot Investigates. And this is one of the only Penguin green classics that I own, and yes, it does still have the price label on the middle because I bought it secondhand for 95p. Yeah, I always wanted to own some of these green Penguin editions, but this is one of the only ones I have. It's The Big Four. Agatha Christie's least favourite of her own books, The Mystery of the Blue Train. and I think that was from the set as well. Same goes for Peril at End House. I think Lord Edgware Dies was from a charity shop. 3-Act Tragedy is in a different edition. I'm quite fond of these editions, but I don't have that many of them in my collection, and this is how HarperCollins had the covers before they went on to these signature edition covers, but I quite like these ones as well. That's 3-Act Tragedy. And we have Death in the Clouds. That's in the sort of black signature edition, and then the colourful signature editions took over. And I also have one very, very battered from a charity shop TV tie-in with David Suchet on the front, which I keep because I quite like David Suchet as Poirot. I think he's how I imagine Poirot. We then have another copy of one of my favourites, Dumb Witness. We have Death on the Nile, which I definitely got in the set. We have a Fontana edition of Sad Cypress, which I think I bought for 95p as well, and a signature edition of 1-2 Buckle My Shoe. And finally on that shelf we have 3 that are in very good colours, and my favourite, 5 Little Pigs, The Hollow, and Mrs McGinty's Dead. And I'm pretty sure I bought Mrs McGinty's Dead new because when I was getting towards the end of all of the Poirot books, I realised I'd missed out Mrs McGinty's Dead and not read it, so I bought myself a copy. That one I did buy new. These 2 were definitely in the set that I bought because they're shiny. Next we're moving on to this shelf. I put these 2, instead of making the Poirot collection go downwards on the shelves, I put these 2 so they go straight across. I may end up changing that at a later time, you never know. I have After the Funeral. That was a charity shop buy, I think. Hickory Dickory Dock, which I've got a feeling I might have been one of the last ones I was after. And I might have bought that one new as well. Editing Alice here, because it was on my TBR trolley, I missed off Third Girl. But I have this Fontana copy of Third Girl. Got The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, which came in that set I bought. And The Clocks, which I think was from a charity shop, but it could have been in that set too. Halloween Party, which again is in this pretty cool different looking edition. I think I only have a couple of those. And then we've got Poirot's Early Cases, which I think I bought new. There's more of these that are new than I thought, and I definitely bought this one new, Curtin, Poirot's Final Case. There's definitely a lot more second-hand books in the standalones and the Marples. I did buy a few of the Poirots new. And this one's an old one that gathers together some of the short stories, and this one's just called Agatha Christie's Poirot. I don't actually have any of the other books in these ones. So that's all the Poirot ones on that shelf. It then goes into my Marple collection. Pretty sure all of these are going to be second hand. We've got a Fontana edition of The Body in the Library, signature edition of The Moving Finger, which was bought from a charity shop, 75p on the sticker of that one. A Murder is Announced, which you can see I bought for 95p in a Fontana edition again. One of these like newer Fontana editions that I don't like as much. They do it with mirrors. And another one of these cool editions I really like, A Pocket Full of Rye. All of those were from second-hand bookshops. And finally on that shelf we have the rest of the Marple collection. 450 from Paddington, another very cool cover. The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side in a very nice edition for 95p. A Caribbean Mystery. You can see a lot of these came from the same second-hand shop. Nemesis, which came from a library sale again. And Sleeping Murder, and I love this. This is my favourite Marple, and it's got such a crazy cover, but this is now absolutely falling apart. The pages tried to fall out of this one last time I reread it. So I thought it would be easier to next go down to the bottom shelf where the rest of my paperbacks are, rather than look at the graphic novel collection. So here we go. The last Miss Marple book, Miss Marple's Final Cases, which is short stories. Again, I think these are pretty much all second hand in this pile. The Seven Dials Mystery, which is an early one of Christie's standalones, although she did write 2 in this series and this one's the sequel, I believe. Editing Alice here again. So since I filmed the video, I have actually gained another Agatha Christie book, and it's this one which I've been looking for ages, a copy of The Man in the Brown Suit. This was Agatha Christie's first standalone, and I'm really looking forward to rereading this one. I know I've said that about a lot of books, but my mum very kindly found this for me in the charity shop near her that has books for only 40p, so absolute bargain. and I'm delighted to add this to my collection. The Mysterious Mr. Quinn, which is about like a very supernatural sort of Harley Quinn type character. Why Didn't They Ask Evans, my absolute favourite Christie title of all time. I do wish I had a nicer cover for this because it's the newer Fontanas which don't have such interesting covers, but I have reread that one. The Hound of Death, which is short stories. And the last Penguin classic crime book that I have is Parker Pyne Investigates, in a very cool old edition with Agatha Christie on the back. Next we've got the Sitterford Mystery with, I think, quite possibly the scariest cover I've ever seen. Murder is Easy, which I really enjoyed. One of my top favourites. I definitely think that these haven't been quite reshelved right, but one of my absolute favourites, And Then There Were None. Death Comes as the End, and the really cool thing about this copy of Death Comes as the End is that I actually bought it at Greenway, Agatha Christie's holiday home, now owned by the National Trust, so I've kept the receipt in that one, which is very cool. It's cool to me, it's quite geeky. And I also got this one stamped with the little Greenway stamp, I hope you can see that. So that's really exciting to me. They Came to Baghdad, Destination Unknown. I'm not a huge fan of some of these later standalones, they're a bit more thrillerish than they are mysteries. Endless Night, and Passenger to Frankfurt, which is one of the final books Christie wrote at a very ripe old age. A short story collection, Problem at Pollenza Bay. This was published posthumously, and this has the Greenway stamp in it as well, because I also treated myself to that at Greenway. Then we have my Tommy and Tuppence collection. So we have Partners in Crime, the short stories about Tommy and Tuppence, and By the Pricking of My Thumbs. Both of those were definitely passed on to me by my mum when she'd bought them secondhand. And I actually bought this one in New York because it was going to be the last Christie mystery that I ever read. I finished up with this one, and it's Poston of Fate, the final Tommy and Tuppence book, and coincidentally and fittingly I thought also the final book that Agatha Christie wrote. I actually bought this one in New York in a brilliant shop called the Mysterious Bookshop, so if you're a fan of mystery and you're in New York, definitely pay them a visit. So that one is bigger than my other ones, but I don't really mind. The last two are novelisations of Agatha Christie plays. One is Spider's Web, which you can see was secondhand also, and the other one, I also bought this in New York on my honeymoon, 2 separate trips. Can't remember where from though, maybe a Barnes & Noble. This one is The Unexpected Guest. So that is all of my Agatha Christie paperbacks. So on the shelf where I have Agatha Christie's graphic novels, obviously not drawn by Agatha Christie, but they're her stories and then imagined on the page by various graphic novel artists. That shelf is shared by a bit of overspill from my Agatha Christie related books. So we've got Poirot and Me, which is David Suchet's memoir. Highly recommend this if you enjoyed the series of Poirot on TV. I have the Agatha Christie Miscellany, which I think was a present. But it's quite cool, and it's got a quote on the front that says, "If anyone writes about my life in the future, I'd rather they got the facts right." Agatha Christie. I also have a copy in Spanish of Crooked House, La Casa Torcida, which I haven't read yet because I don't really read Spanish. I did take a Spanish module at university, but nowhere near enough to actually be able to read this. But I thought I would have a try at reading this because I would be able to look at it alongside a book that I already know was my theory, and also because this was 50p in a charity shop and I couldn't resist. And this one is the graphic memoir of Agatha Christie's life. So the rest of the graphic novel collection, they're all very similar. In the UK they were launched with these sorts of covers. We've got The Man in the Brown Suit, Secret Adversary, these are in no particular order because I keep messing about with the pile, Murder at the Vicarage. A lot of them are Poirot ones. This is one of the French ones, which I think have got much better covers. Really cool cover. This is Rendezvous avec l'amour. I probably could read these in French, especially as they're graphic novels was my theory, but I haven't actually read them yet. So I've got those to look forward to. Most of these were secondhand because by the time I realised they'd stopped publishing them, it was many years later and they were pretty unavailable, but I've collected most of them on eBay. A lot of them are like second-hand library copies from eBay. So this one is actually the one that started the collection. I bought this new when it first came out, and it's Dead Man's Folly. Also have Endless Night, The Secret of Chimneys. Quite a lot of these are standalones actually. Ordeal by Innocence, and then there were none. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Dumb Witness, Murder on the Links. I'm actually going to wait to read most of these until I've reread the book. So when I reread the book, I think I will then read the graphic novel, because I didn't want to get spoilers of anything that I've forgotten. That's the magazine I showed you earlier. So I also got Five Little Pigs, Cards on the Table, Evil Under the Sun, Death on the Nile, Murder in Mesopotamia, The Mystery of the Blue Train. This one I got new at the beginning as well, Murder on the Orient Express. And the same for this one, Halloween Party. For a lot of years, Halloween Party, Murder on the Orient Express and Dead Man's Folly were the only three that I owned, and then I started trying to collect the rest. And this last one is The Big Four. Annoyingly, I actually now own all of these except for Peril at End House, which I can't find anywhere apart from for extortionate amounts of money on Amazon or eBay, so I'm going to keep keeping an eye out for those. I also have two more French ones that haven't been published in English, which is ABC Contre Poirot and Hercule Poirot, La Mysterious Affaire de Steels. I don't know if that French is any good, but interestingly enough, with these graphic novels, they were published first in French and then the English versions were translated, I believe. I don't know if these three will ever be republished into English, but I thought I would get them anyway and see if I could read them in French. We'll see, but I think these ones have very, very cool covers. Really, really like those. There are a lot of different artists though, so if you would like to see a further video about the graphic novels when I've read some more of them, let me know in the comments. I might do that at a later time. That brings us to the end of my Agatha Christie collection. That's everything that I own at this point, I think. You will have noticed, if you are an eagle-eyed Agatha Christie fan, that I don't actually own every single one of Christie's books. I have read them, but I've mostly read them from the library, so I will still look out to plug gaps in my collection from charity shops and second-hand shops as and when I see any of these books. So I hope you've enjoyed this rather chaotic shelf tour today. Thank you for joining me on Agatha Christie's birthday to celebrate Agatha Christie. And please do give this video a like if you did enjoy it, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I would love to hear your comments in the description down below. Do you own any Agatha Christie books? Would you like to own any Agatha Christie books? And if you don't have something that you'd really like to say, perhaps leave me an Agatha Christie related emoji. That's all from me today. I hope very much to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.